Thank you for being here today. As we discussed, I want to dive into your professional and personal stories, of course, which is always important as well. I'm so happy that we are together because, especially as a woman in audio, we are very underrepresented. So we are like less than 5% of audio people, if that. So it's a privilege to have you and discuss your practices, which are many. So your practices range from field recording to conservation, tour guiding, writing, photography, and also field research, if I can remember them all. And
Yes,
so
I
we
do
have
well
so much to
either.
talk about. Let's start with how you started your practices, especially in field recording. So when did you start recording sounds and how did it evolve into your practice?
So my nature sound passion comes from where I grew up. We grew up with a lot of nature sounds, like morning songs of birds, like frogs or crickets. Those are some of the sounds I remember when growing up. And I've always been fascinated by sound. It's just that the last couple of years I've wanted to sort of capture them as a way of preserving them and to relive the memories that I have when I come back from safaris or, photography expeditions or filming. And 2 years ago, I was part of a Jackson Wilder mentorship program, and I had requested for, a mentor. And in one of the extra sections, I filled out that I have a passion for nature sound recording and I would love to incorporate this into my filmmaking. And so I was paired up with a mentor who also happened to be an ornithologist and a scientist and an artist. And I think from there, my field recording just grew because he would offer, lessons or experiences or even, advice in technical aspects that I could not think of as just a beginner. And so it's evolved into what now I'm calling field recording, or what I've learned it's called. For me, it was just recording nature sounds. That's just it. Yeah. And yeah, from there, it's just been every time I would go out and record something, and he would give advice and say, or maybe next time make sure there is not extra noise or human noise or traffic or airplanes, because we have a lot of airplanes in Kenya. And some of these places, some people prefer to get to by flying. So there's a lot of air traffic noise. Yeah.
Apart from these noises, I think you're very lucky location wise. Because of this tour guide practice of yours, you have access to wonderful places. We talked about Mount Kenya, Masai Mara, and Amani Forest. So these are like what a lot of people dream of going to, and you have them nearby. So that's such a rich habitat, let's say. And with your tour guide experience, you have a lot of things you can record. So can you tell me about this conservation, storytelling, and also your practices on ecotourism, as we call it?
Ecotourism. Thank you. Yeah, so my background is in tourism management. I work as a tour guide because I love the outdoors. Um, I'm also into conservation because without the conservation, we would not have places to show visitors or even anyone really. So I blend the two, And when I go out with visitors or with groups into a national park or a national reserve, we stay in the national reserve and we get to watch animals, we get to experience nature. Sometimes we don't see anything, but we experience the sounds. So the field recording has actually come in handy because I try to tell the groups to, just listen, to sit and listen to the quiet. And sometimes they even like mentioning, they were like, oh, wow, this is so serene, this is so quiet. I could just sit here and listen. So my work as a tour guide actually gives me access to some of these places because if I were to go there alone, it would be costly. These are
Yeah.
places that are hard to reach and you cannot just walk in. You have to have a car or a certain car, like a 4-wheel drive, because they're wild places. They're not tarmacked, So with my groups or with my tourism and conservation, that gives me access to these places, which I'm really, really privileged, I think.
Yeah. Perfect. And you don't limit yourself to just having access to these places. You also like going into the scientific research and sharing these in your writings and also learning from the scientists in this area. So can you elaborate a bit on that, your practice?
So before I got into the industry, while I was in college, I used to volunteer a lot in conservation organizations, or especially at the museum, where we would go for nature walks, different nature walks, to watch birds, to watch mammals, to learn about trees, to learn about amphibians, reptiles, basically everything. And so my career has grown at the Nairobi National Museum, where I volunteered a lot and worked with a lot of scientists. And most of them are usually very happy to share their knowledge in that, when you're in that space, you gain a lot of knowledge because they're just sharing information, stuff, technicalities, and you end up learning a lot. It's like sometimes it feels like a sponge. You just absorbing everything. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, most of these scientists now, they actually know me and they're always identifying some of the sounds that I cannot identify. If I think it's a frog and I do not know what kind, I will send to the herpetologist who studies reptiles and amphibians, and he will tell me this is a toad or this is a frog. If it's bat, sometimes I'll send to the mammal scientist and they'll tell me that is a bat.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll think it's a bird and probably it's something else. So I've had those instances
Yeah.
as well. And so, yeah, I think my experience in volunteering has also given me access to the scientists, which most people never really meet because they're always in the labs, they're always in the field. So when I get that interaction, I also really feel very lucky. And
Yes.
so the information I get from them, that's the information I also transfer into my tour guiding. When I assist in the research studies, I also transfer that knowledge into my tour guiding. And so I make sure my guiding is as rich as I can make it. And field recording or nature sound recording is just a bonus for me and for my clients because they really appreciate it.
Yes. It's interesting how you like cross share with these scientists, so you have like 100% accuracy of what you're recording, the genders of what you're recording, the animals or the specifics of that area. So I listened to some of your recordings and They are extremely rich. First of all, the chorus is, you have the chorus at every time of the day. So you have the early morning, middays, like night, nocturnals, evening. So it's such a lucky habitat. And as I listened, I realized how loud they are. Like, you can actually feel that that area is almost untouched, and the animals have that freedom to express themselves as they are in their natural existence. And I realized the toads or the frogs, I always mix both, they have a different specific sound than the different ones I've heard elsewhere. So they are like, they have a longer shout, let's say. It doesn't come like intermittently, but they're like opera singers. As far as I know, it's also one of your favorites. So did you go after them, or did they just happen to be there when you had a mic drop?
So the sounds actually differ during different seasons. And so here in
Yeah.
Kenya, we have two seasons, the hot season and the rainy season. We have the long rain season, which is from March to May. And then we have a short rain season, which is also October and November. And so when it's rainy, there's usually a lot of sounds, like, because a lot of animals now are breeding, they're making nests, they're advertising for mates. And so if I know it's been raining in one place, I know I only have to look for a swamp or just a pool of water, and I know there's going to be probably sounds of frogs and toads. When it's dry, I know the time they call, it's probably at night. So I will set my mic drops depending on those circumstances. But also sometimes, like, I think you've had one that I recorded in a forest in Uganda. I placed my mic near a swamp, and I was hoping to get sounds of frogs and amphibians, just there. And I got, the following day when I collected the rig, I was like, oh wow, that is a very unique sound of a toad. I've never heard it. And I happened to be in a group of women because we were attending the International Conference for Women Birders. And I played this sound to one of the ladies, and she said, no, 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 those are not frogs or toads. Those are bats. And I said, what? She said, yes, those are bats. And if you share the sound, I'm going to share the sound with a friend of mine who studies bats. And we did. And he actually confirmed that they were sounds of bats. And I told her I've never heard a bat calling that loud.
Wow.
I only know the ones that, the fruit bats, those are,
Yeah.
they're not that loud. And so I went to look into the species and started reading about it. And, I learned that those are some of the largest bats we have. In Africa, they are called hammer-headed bats because their heads look
Yes.
like hammers. They're huge. And what I recorded was a behavior called lecking, where the males honk, or they produce this loud sound, and they use that to advertise for females to mate with. And so the male with the largest honk gets, the females. And so I would not have learned that if I had not recorded the sound. What I want to do now is see one of those bats because I did not see them.
And what was the
Yeah.
area like? Was it like a forest, or was it near a cave?
Yeah, it was a forest. It was a forest reserve that is accessible by communities, visitors. It's not super closed. Like, it's not strictly only accessible to visitors. The communities have access to the forest. They go in there to some weeks or some days of the week to collect firewood. And so this part of the forest was swampy. It was wet. And yeah, I just figured if I can't record anything else, probably I can just record the sounds of the frogs. But I never ended up with the sounds of frogs. I ended up with sounds of birds.
Yes.
I feel special because when I'm setting up the rig, I always have a guide, and they always help me to maybe hold a mic when I'm taping it to a tree or setting it up somewhere or hiding it. And before we leave, I always put the headphones on and I listen, and then I give them the headphones, and you can see the expressions changing. They're like, oh, wow, I didn't know it sounded like that. Because with your naked ears, you just hear, the normal sounds of birds and what your ears are used to. But then when you have the headphones, it amplifies some of those sounds that you cannot even hear with your naked ears. And I think that helps them understand what I'm actually trying to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's that part as well. You're advertising our practices to new people, and they actually start seeing the world differently, hearing the world differently.
Yeah. I think with communities, they tell you, yeah, those sounds, we hear them every day. Because it's true, those sounds are there every day. Like I told you, I grew up with those sounds. But now when they hear them on a headphone or when you've recorded them, then it brings out, I think, a new appreciation of your surroundings. And they're always even happy to tell you, do you know, last night I heard this sound. They even imitate the sounds they had. What do you think it is? Or I heard this bird calling like this. What do you think it is? And they will tell you, oh, I know a place where there's a lot of sounds. You can go and record there anytime. So they're happy to share with you when you share what you've gotten from there. And I think for me, that's more fulfilling for me than even the sounds that I record.
They're very lucky. Your tour groups are very lucky because they're not only focused on seeing but also on hearing.
Yes, the tour groups are really, they appreciate because most of the time it's their first time to come to Kenya or to Africa as a whole. I know the tour groups that are always shocked at the sounds of our toads when they call after it rains because they just start, like it's a quiet evening, and then when you're going to sleep, this chorus starts, and it's something that you've never heard, and they'll be like, what's that noise? And we'll tell them it's toads. They're calling because it just rained. They're celebrating, maybe having some water. Yeah, they're always like, oh, I've never had something that loud. Because again, most of them might be living in the cities. What we hear is sounds of traffic all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you have access to all these places, but do you have favorite locations, favorite times of the year for recording?
Like I said, the times in the years, yes, I love the rainy season because that's when there's a lot of, organisms calling. But I also love the dry seasons because sometimes you get very unique sounds that you might not get in the rainy season or something. I don't know, they just sound different. And I think they're more amplified during the rainy season because that's when everything is alive.
And what about locations?
My favorite locations. Oh wow, that's a very hard question to answer because every location is different. Like here in Kenya, the sounds we get in Masai Mara are going to be very different from the ones we get, say, in Savo, in Eastern Kenya. These are two different regions of the country, and so yeah, every place is special in its own way. You cannot choose one. But I loved. I think for me, Masai Mara is more accessible. A
Yeah.
lot of tour groups go there. I go to Savo at least once a year, and that's in November because Savo West National Park has a migratory corridor, and we happen to have a most unique migration of birds that happens from October to, between October and December. A lot of birds from Europe, Asia are passing through Kenya. And so for me, Savo is always like the world connecting because we have all these local birds and we have birds that are coming from other countries. And so sounds like an international concert or something. Yeah. So,
And okay, so now I have a more difficult question. What's your favorite sound?
oh, um, I love, I love the sound of the lion. I love the roar of the lion because it's beautiful and it's special and it's scary at the same time. It
Yeah.
sounds very nice when it's a bit far away from you, but very scary if it's very close to you. You're like, oh my God, am I going to be
Yeah.
its next meal? You know?
Yeah.
So when it rolls, when it's like a few meters away from you, like even your heart vibrates, like you feel it in your
Yeah.
body and you're like, oh wow. But then you start wondering, oh my God, how close is it? You know? So it brings out all these emotions and feelings and wonder, and you're like, oh wow, that's really that's special. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the adrenaline. It must be amazing.
Oh yeah, it is. But when I say it's scary, it's really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember this one time I tried to record the sound of I was just listening to the night, like just in my tent. We were in Nakuru National Park, and I was like, oh, let me put on my headphones and hear what's out there. And at 11 o'clock, these lions started roaring like right next to my tent. There was only a thin wire mesh fence between us, but at that time, like I even sat up. I was shocked and even sat up in my tent and listened. And you're like, is it going to hear me when I breathe? Because it sounded so close.
Yeah.
And that was, yeah, that was like there was a fence between us, but all these thoughts are going through your head. You're like, what if it jumps over? What if
Yeah.
like it rolled and then it was quiet and it walked away and you could hear its footsteps when walking away.
Wow.
So when I
Wow.
say the sound of the lion, I think one of my fellow guides said sometimes they just like reminding us who the king of the jungle is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you see my lion on the screen?
Hello, Kitty.
Yeah, he wants attention. Because you have all this access to the wildlife. So you're not just a nature recordist, but also wildlife recordist. And you have that personal security issue, but also the security of your equipment is also important. So how do you deal with that?
I always travel with my recording kit. Um, Sometimes I end up not using it at all when if I'm too busy with the groups or where we are, it's too noisy to
Yeah.
record anything. But sometimes I always find a corner of our lodge or the park to set the microphone in. And I've read a lot because my recording kit it's not waterproof. So when I said I love a recording during the rainy season, that's also a challenge because my kit is not waterproof. And so a while back I was reading how to waterproof your kit and stuff like that. And now sometimes when it's too rainy and I really want the sounds, I just use like a thin cling film on the microphone so that when it rains, the water just falls off the microphone. I also use dry bags that are waterproof, and well, sometimes the water and the cold makes my power bank run dry so fast. What else? The safety. So, as a woman, I think most women will resonate with this. The first thing we think about, even when you're planning anything, safety is always our number one thing that we think about and that we consider. And so, if I'm not with the tour groups, most of the time I will hire a guide who comes from the place where I want to go and record, and I will ask about all these security issues or safety issues, especially in the forest. Most of the places are safe to go into as a woman, but still that thought is always in your mind. Like, I know it is safe, but is it safe? So for me, I always have someone with me. And most of the time, it's a fellow woman guide that comes from the community or that speaks the local language. And that way, I find that we survive because we are telling the stories now. Sometimes, if you're in the national parks, the security is more from the wildlife because our animals are dangerous. They are wild, so they're unpredictable. We have lions, we have hyenas, we have elephants, we have buffaloes, we have hippos, and these are animals that can, you know, attack anytime. So we need rangers in those instances where you are in a national park. You always have to have a ranger, and they have guns. And this is not to shoot the animals. This is just to shoot into the air, especially with buffaloes.
Yeah.
Buffaloes are one of the dangerous
To
animals.
scare them away.
Yeah, to scare them
Yeah.
away. But also we have places where poaching still happens, like hunting of wild animals. And so you do not want to encounter a poacher. So if they're there to hunt the animals and you're there to record sounds, so the presence of a ranger ensures that you're well protected from the animals and from poachers. And also in places where we have poaching incidences, the animals tend to be more aggressive than in places where there's no poaching, where the animals will
Yeah.
feel safe with a lot of people around. So my tour guiding also experience includes studying animal behavior. So that also helps me when I'm out in the field. Like, you can judge how an animal is going to react to your presence or to the presence of a large group or foreign foreign things like recorders. The monkeys will come and play with your kit.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've had monkeys like play with my kit and found it on the ground. Lucky we were in a lodge, and so no one took the kit. but the monkeys can be mischievous. Yeah.
Yeah. And before, when we were talking about if people steal your equipment, you said women and kids don't, but sometimes men do tend to steal.
Yeah, in Uganda, where the forests are accessible, like they're open to communities or to anyone, like anyone can walk in. So it's always a gamble. It's always a gamble because you're not sure if someone will see your kit and take it, or if they will see your kit and be curious about it or disturb it. And like this one time when we were recording the birds in Uganda, my female guide, she said, I asked her, how safe is my kit? Because I can see people, you know, using the path next to where I put the kit. And she said, oh, these are women and children. They cannot steal your kit. If it were men, they would probably destroy it or steal it. And so that brings out, I don't know whether it's curiosity or just them being afraid of foreign equipment, because a lot of people just know microphones should be huge, but my microphones are really tiny, so I just tie them around a tree.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's always a gamble. You might find your kit the following day or you might not.
Yeah.
But sometimes
Exactly.
that's also the reason I like traveling with my fellow female guides, because they will offer, little nuggets of knowledge from their experiences. They'd be like, oh, no, the women will not steal. In fact, if they find a kid trying to mess with it, they will be like, oh no, maybe someone is doing a research, because these are places that are also accessible to researchers and scientists. And they will know there are some
Yeah.
things that are set out in the forest to do something. So the women will
Yeah.
not touch them. The women will discourage their kids from touching them. But the men,
Yeah.
they are unpredictable.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the comment you mentioned before, like you're studying the animal behavior as well. That's also, I think, good for this preservation of nature as well, because you're also passing on information to the scientists, to the people who are touring the world, the people, the community. Maybe the community also knows, but maybe not, because you're after those animals, especially to get their sounds. So it helps in a way for the preservation of the animals, the natural habitats as well, I think.
It does. Animal behavior is, I think it's one of the key things, even in tour guiding. If we always depend on animal behavior to know where they are or how they are going to be behaving. And when I go to places where there's a lot of community people, like accessing those spaces, the communities know some of these behaviors. Actually, most of them know the animal behavior better than us. And they will tell you, do not go there at this time, because the birds probably will come at 9 o'clock, or they usually leave at 9 o'clock. If it's a swamp and there's a lot of birds, the community members, they'll tell you, you're looking for the birds. They usually leave very early in the morning. Like there's a wetland I usually go for bird watching. And so we get there by 6 a.m. in the morning. And the geese and the ducks, they will usually leave there, go feed somewhere else, and then come back to the swamp. And so this one time, this lady told us, "Oh, you're looking for the birds. They usually leave in the morning, like 7, but if you stick around, they're going to be coming back at 9." and we thought, oh wow, that's super specific. But they know that because they're always fetching water from the swamp, and they
Yes.
see how these birds behave. If we are in the
Yes.
field and we know an animal has a baby, mothers and babies, so that's an animal that will be very protective of the baby. It can be aggressive depending on how close you get, so we do not get close. Also, we do not get
Yeah.
close to or in between an animal and its baby because they're going to be super aggressive. The other thing is during, different times of the day, we know the birds will call very early in the morning and afternoon. They'll probably be quieter and then start calling again at dusk. We know the bats don't call during the day. We know most frogs and toads, they don't call during the day. So yeah, those are some of the animal behaviors we look out for. If it's here when you are guiding, we say it's safer to approach a large herd of buffaloes rather than approaching one because one will be super, super, I don't want to say scared, it will just be aggressive because the friends are not there. There's not many other buffaloes. So to
Yeah.
approach that, you have to keep your distance. Elephants as well, if you cannot get near them, if they have a baby or if they're in a place where there's a lot of poaching, they're going to be more aggressive than places where there's not much poaching. Yeah, so I love animal behavior.
Yes. Are you
Yeah.
writing about these for other wildlife field recordists? I think you should prepare a
Um,
guideline.
I could write that because it's interesting that you ask that because we we see visitors coming to Kenya and because in their countries they can go into a zoo and maybe they've seen people pet some of these animals in zoos. And so when they come here on a safari or visiting, they think, oh, I can approach this lion. It's not that dangerous. I can pet it. But those are some of the precautions we put across before we start any safari or any tour. And
Yeah.
some will come and think that because we have different animals, where you come from, I don't know what dangerous animals there are in the wild, but most of the places here we have dangerous animals, we have venomous snakes. You can't go alone, you have to have someone.
Yeah.
Okay. And we always see visitors come here and think, back at home I go into the forest or into the woods alone. What can be, you know, different about this? And we tell them, yes, we have dangerous animals, but most of the time it takes a little bit of time before that sinks in, which can be a challenge. I know some field recordists that always have like proper guides and rangers and all logistics, like they've taken into consideration taking care of either the equipment or themselves and the people they're traveling with. Yeah, so maybe I could write this for the future field recordists who are planning to come to
Yes.
Kenya.
Yes,
Yeah,
because the things you mentioned is very holistic, so very valuable. So if I were to come there, and I hope I do one day, so
I
I,
hope
I
you do.
wouldn't just, yeah, I wouldn't just, apart from my research, of course, I wouldn't just like to depend on my guide because the way you tell it is like the time of the year, the animal behaviors, or the soundscape according to the time of the year, time of the day, if they have a baby or not, if they are in groups or individuals. So, so the perspective of a sound person is broader. I think you should write about it. You should capture it for the wildlife recordists, because especially if they are living in the more developed side of the world, there's a lots of additional effort they need to put in to capture the right sounds. And we also discussed like people, even to their best intention, they come spend a few days in wild nature, but they don't have the time to dig into the community's knowledge, and then they record and then go back, and they miss like 2/3 of the information in that recording, in that community, in that space, forest, etc. That's very, very valuable. We also talked about, same for me, living in not so developed country and not having access, monetary access, let's say, or the visibility to expand our profession. So when we talked about this, we talked about mentors, their contribution to our practice, and also maybe having access to some grants or occasions for visibility. Can you talk about your experience in these areas?
Like I said, I'm very privileged to have had access to really kind mentors. The first one, Ben, he's an ornithologist and has worked with different communities around the world. And I love his involvement of communities in his work, because sometimes I've seen, articles like when you're reading about a sound, and the article mentions, oh, there were no people in this area. They portray a place with no people, but all of those places have people or communities that live around those areas. My mentors have actually shared a lot of knowledge in terms of technical use of equipment, or how to edit sounds or capture clean sounds to begin with, which I prefer because I'm not very good at editing.
Yeah.
They've provided access to grants, like, for example, Earth FM. Last year, they provided grantees from Global South with equipment and logistical grants to record sounds in our countries. And I think that gave me a boost because I felt that I was accountable.
Yeah.
If I use my money, I'm only accountable to myself. And I know if I record bad sounds, I'm the one that will suffer. Like, I'll have to spend more to go back and record. But now this one, you're super vigilant, I think, super careful, sometimes not even knowing if you're recording the right thing, and or being afraid of the failures, because I've gone to places, I've planned a field recording expedition, like this coming weekend or this coming week, I'm going to record sound in this place. And then you use that grant, you go to record to that place, and you don't get clean sounds, or you don't get sounds at all because maybe it's raining throughout, you know. So some of these I've actually just learned to embrace the failure or the challenges.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah, but I think access to the grants makes the field recording a bit more easier, because you can go to many places without having to worry about your safety, because you have the money to pay for a ranger, you have the money to pay for a guide, you have the money to pay for accommodation in those places, which sometimes they tend to be very expensive because they're exclusive. Those places, they sell the sound or the quiet,
Yeah.
because a lot of visitors,
Right.
they will go into exclusive places or camps because there's not many other 1,000 hotels nearby. So
Yeah.
sometimes those are the places I would like to go and record, but they're super exclusive and they're super expensive. So for now, they're in my list of places to record. Sometimes, like I mentioned before, these places, they will not allow you to walk. So you have to be in a car throughout because of the dangerous animals. You cannot walk in the parks. So you have to have a car that can survive the untarmac roads in the bush.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have, not sometimes, all the time, you have to have a guide that understands what you are doing. Because I remember my first field recording expedition in Mount Kenya. I wanted to go with a certain guide into the forest, but he got another group before I could have him. And I was given a different guide who was only a hiking guide. And I told him, this is what I'm trying to do. And since it's already a bit late into the evening, I at least want an hour in the forest, if that's possible. And he said, yeah, it's possible. But 15 minutes into the recording session, and he started asking me, when are we going back? When are we going back? And I had to cut short that recording because he couldn't leave me in the forest. I asked him, can I stay in the forest? And he said, there are elephants here. I cannot leave you in the forest alone. So yeah, I think a guide that understands what you're trying to achieve is very important. That's how I learned to actually handpick the people I would like to go recording with. And most of those time it's been the women, they're more patient. Yeah, I think we are conditioned
Yeah.
to be more patient than the guys. And they will tell you, if it's recording and we are not supposed to talk, can we go to the other side of the trail where we can keep maybe bird watching or learning about the plants, while this one records maybe for an hour or 2 hours. And yeah, I
Yes.
think that helps. And back to my mentors, I will record and bring back the recordings to the mentors, and they will listen and they will ask you, how did you set up the mic? Or they will ask you a photo of how you set up the mic. I remember one incident, I found a tree. There was a tree that had a hole in it. And so I figured there are hippos that are going to be calling from this side in the evening. And I just put my mics into the hole. At that time, I did not know about the tree ears, and I was afraid someone would see them or a monkey would see it and start playing with it. And so I put the microphones into the hole. And I shared a photo of my setup. And my mentor, in fact, Melissa, is the one who told me, now think of this as your ears. So if you listen to this, it's going to sound like you're underwater. And I listened to it and it was really horrible. But lucky enough, I was there for several days. I was able to correct that. And the other mistake I made, not a mistake, I thought I was protecting my gear. I told one of the ground staff I showed him my setup. I told him, could you make sure no one disturbs it or tampers with the recording. And he said, sure. And we went for a game drive because it was really early in the morning. We went for a game drive, and I was hoping to come and collect it at maybe 9 or 10 a.m. And so I found this guy. He had not moved from that place, and he had been cutting grass the
Wow.
whole time. So I got a
Oh
recording
my
of the guy just
God.
cutting grass around that tree. And
Oh my God.
yeah, we learn. So yeah, those are some of the recording I just keep so I could share what not to do.
Exactly.
Or, yeah. The good thing is that it was high season, and I knew I was going to come back to the same place. So
Yes.
the next time I came back, I chose a tree that was further out in the camp. But now I set up my mic, and somehow the monkeys saw my equipment, and they decided, oh, we have a toy today, let's play. And so I found my recorder. I think it recorded the whole thing, but it was still on the ground, bit dusty, opened,
Yeah.
but it was safe. So yeah, those are some of the um, things. So the mentors have actually been helping us
Yeah.
to understand, if you're recording pure nature sounds, it has to feel like no one is there, including you,
Exactly.
like no human is there. So sometimes you'll have those recordings, and sometimes in the edits, you can remove the human sounds if there are any. The mentors have also shared, like, I think the equipment you use also is very important in recording. It gives you different qualities of your recordings. I think I've used the basic one that I have, and I like it. Maybe to the professionals, they'll say, oh, that's too basic. But when they listen to the sounds, they cannot tell what equipment I'm using. So probably the equipment doesn't matter that much. But I'm really grateful to the mentors I've had so far. The team at RFM for giving us the grants and the equipment and lessons, like short courses. There was a course designed by Jan, Basics in Field Recording, that was really helpful. There was an online course on editing. I think Melissa facilitated that. There was also another session where we had questions for field recording professionals who've been doing this for years. George Vlad did that session. I've had access and interaction with Samuel, who's from Ghana but works in Germany. He's always sharing sounds he's interested in urban sound.
We can leave names and links at the description of this video. Just
Yeah.
drop a few links on the mentors and institutions we mentioned, and also the grants, maybe the ones that we know of, so other field recordists and other women can also benefit from.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm glad you say that, because from now, the recordings that I've been able to share with Earth FM, I've gotten inquiries about maybe there's someone who requested me for sounds of the black and white colobus monkey. And that is someone who just listened to my recordings and thought they were good, and figured out maybe I have this sound that he doesn't have because it comes from Australia. And so I said, yes, I have it. And he said he had been approached by Nashville Zoo in the US, where they want to incorporate sounds of animals in their zoo, in their exhibition. And I thought that was really nice, because you can say, oh yeah, I know that person who gave that sound. and you can have
Yeah,
the correct sounds for those animals, I would say.
exactly.
So for
Exactly.
me, I like knowing what I record. So,
Yeah.
and sometimes it really disturbs me when I cannot identify something that is calling in my recording and I cannot identify it. So that's when I reach out to the scientists at the museum and my fellow guides and ask them, have you heard this sound before? What could it be? And I've learned about different animal sounds because you can find that, let's say a bird is calling, it has an alarm call, it has a feeding call, it has like just a normal day call. So sometimes, back to my animal behavior, sometimes we will hear birds calling, and depending on how they're calling, depending on how they're calling, we can tell if it's an alarm call. For example, if you're in a place and they see, say, a snake, they will all flock into that tree and they will make a lot of noise, all looking down or looking to the direction where the enemy is, and they will call until the enemy leaves. So that's when we call, oh, there is something there. So we go and check and find, oh, it's a snake. So they also alert you about what's going on.
Lovely. So you've already collected a huge experience on field recording in that area. What are some of the future aspirations of yours? What would you like to record more of, or where else, or what kind of projects do you want to take on?
So far I've been able to get contracted to record sounds for films, for a documentary. There's one we filmed in Tanzania in Amani Forest. It's called the Chameleon Corridors. And I was able to record sounds for that. So that is an area I would like to pursue, record nature sounds for films and documentaries. But usually they're not so open to sound recordists. The nature sound recordists, like they will incorporate the interview. The person who is recording the interviews will also record like maybe 1 minute of ambience or the sounds that's there. But yeah, I think I would want to continue recording sound for films, for nature films. I would also love to contribute to an archive, to have like a Kenyan archive of sounds. So far, I've used my sound in presentations, like a recent conference on African bioacoustics, which is people who are studying animal sounds to further their, conservation or science studies. I would like to record most of the green spaces we have in Kenya as a start. And I would like to maybe collaborate now with scientists because most of them now are incorporating animal sounds into their studies. So I would like to contribute to that. It's a journey, I think.
Yeah, it's a lot of projects. It's so exciting. I really hope you have the chance to pursue them all. And lastly, do you have any recommendations for women in field recording, especially young women who are just kicking off?
I would say yes, if you have the passion for it. I remember before I got my recording kit, I would just hear a sound and I would want to record that sound and I would use my phone. There's recording apps that can record on your phone. If you come from places where women are not encouraged a lot to get into the field work, then you have to work twice as hard to, you have to prove to people
Right.
that you can do this. You have to prove to people that you can survive in the wild. And most of these look very challenging. But I think if you reach out to anyone, really, I think every mentor I've reached out to, most of the people that I've reached out to have been really kind and happy to assist in any way they can. So don't be afraid of reaching out to people, even on social media,
Yeah.
because on social media it's a bit relaxed, it's not that serious. So
Yeah.
yeah, and
Like I reached out to you.
yes, I've gotten a lot of people have reached out to me a lot on Instagram actually, or even on SoundCloud and
Yeah.
Facebook. And I think
Yeah.
that's nice because then you expect people to respond to you, but also not everyone responds. And if the
Mhm.
people you reach out to don't respond, they do not represent every other person that could respond to your questions
Yeah.
or your inquiries. I think just don't give up.
Yeah.
Also, I've learned that through sharing my work is how I've gotten people to reach out because they want to hear more of my sounds. They want to ask about a certain sound. And I also reach out to field recordists. Some of them will post specific wildlife, and I will comment and say that maybe it sounds like similar to ours. Sounds like something I've heard before, just I didn't expect it to be there. And so these are some of the settings. I'm always curious to learn what other people are doing. I'm always curious to know what's happening. If I have questions, I think sometimes we are afraid of professional field recordists because maybe you think that's someone who will not have time for your questions. But I found that they're always happy to answer questions and assist in any way. Yeah, I will not mention about safety because that's something that is constantly on our minds. So
Yeah.
it's always something I always consider first. If you feel unsafe, I think it's always good to reach out to either your circles or your support system. If you have any, it's always good to have a good support system of friends, even if they're not in the
Yeah.
same profession. Someone else, your support system will understand.
Yeah. It's great to see you're also open to supporting the newcomers to the profession and also women as well. It's always better to collaborate and enrich our practice while learning from each other, I'd say.
Yes, I do that because I always want to be the support that I wanted. When I was starting, I wished I had good support, which I did. And so I offer that whenever I can. And if I'm not able to offer any support, I will always recommend someone else who can offer that support. So
Mhm.
it's a chain of, support. If I'm not able to, I will recommend someone that can.
Yes. Martha, thank you so much for sharing so much experience in such short time, I'd say. I've learned so much from you, your surroundings, your hints and tips on recording, and also your mistakes and where you feel you need to learn more. Thank you for this openness of sharing your experiences and also the personal side of it as well.
Thank you too for reaching out and for offering this platform. And I hope we can have more women. I think every field needs a lot of women in it because even in my guiding field, we are not as many. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think yeah, there's need for more women into the field.
So we'll do what we can for each other.
Yes, yes.
Okay, then. So I'll see you later. And good luck with your projects.
Thank
And
you so
take care.
much. Thank you so much, and keep sharing and keep providing this space for women. It's really nice.
I will. Thank you.